All right, so today I'm going to show you quickly how to set up and configure Kerno. I'll be using an open source repo called Flagsmith. So I'll just get started here and I'll tell Claude to open Flagsmith and set up Kerno. So what's going to happen here, I already have Flagsmith copied locally. So this is gonna open Flagsmith and it's gonna start setting up Kerno for the project. So what it's gonna do is once Flagsmith is open and once the Kerno agent is started, it's gonna start indexing Flagsmith, creating the graph and analyzing every endpoint and every part of the code base. And on the other side, Claude is gonna start the Flagsmith server and dependencies locally inside Docker, and then connect that to Kerno so that we can run our tests. So as you can see here, the app is already running. So the SUT is the system under test, and we have a Postgres as a dependency running as a container in Docker. And so Kerno will now be configured to speak to that server and the Postgres, and we should be ready to go. So okay, so Claude already finished the setup. So we can see that the environment is reachable, that the server is reachable, and so now we are ready to start testing. Because this is a new repo, and Kerno has never been configured for this repo, so the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna calibrate Kerno to this repository. So as you can see here, yes, so we're done. So the SUD, the service under test is up, the Postgres is up, the Kerno agent is healthy, and basically Kerno has detected 114 endpoints for Flagsmith for this repo, and we also connected to the Flagsmith MCP server. So because Kerno supports both validating and verifying endpoints, but also MCP servers. So as you can see here, it says one thing before starting is that we have no calibration recorded for this repo. So calibration is the way that Kerno basically learns general rules about your repo. So these things include authentication, any tokens, any multi-tenancy, any gotchas about your repo, or very peculiar things that how your application works. So this is a one-time calibration that is usually done at the beginning of every setup. And then this calibration is then saved as custom rules. So custom rules are things that you can tell Kerno specifically about your repo, business context, logic that Kerno will then remember when verifying the behavior of your application. So here we can just, we'll tell Claude to run calibration. So run calibration. And so what Claude is going to do here is that Claude already knows this repo, so it has access to like these to the Claude.md file, the agent.md files. So it's going to look at the repo, it's going to analyze and look for very specific things that Kerno is asking it for, and then it's going to present me with the findings, and then myself as the maintainer of this repo, hypothetically, I will have to approve those and see if they make sense, and then that will basically form the baseline of what Kerno understands of your repo. And then Kerno also has a memory function and a learning function. So as Kerno interacts with your repo, as it verifies different endpoints and different parts of your code base, it's going to learn more about maybe specific things that are not a global rule, but are specific to, let's say, a specific endpoint or a controller or something. And then it will extract those and learn those and save those as custom rules that you can then validate. You can manage them as you wish, but they're going to be always stored, and Kerno will load them every time it's looking to verify your application. All right, so Claude did an investigation, and now it's presenting us basically with the findings. So we start with target 1 out of 5, which is user authentication. So it explains me a bit how the authentication works here and like the credential that it's going to use. So this looks good, so I'll keep it. As you can see here, this is the verify tag. This means that Claude actually verified this and not just inferred it from the code. It means it actually made a call and saw that these things actually work. So we're gonna keep it this, and so now Claude is gonna create a custom rule to save this as a custom global rule of how this application works. So the second one is the API token. Again, you figure out how the tokens are minted, how they're done. So we're gonna it's been verified, so we're gonna keep this one. This one's the third one. So this is how to see the data, because so Kerno is connected to the database. So Kerno doesn't only verify, doesn't only run black box verification. It actually runs full-fledged verification by seeding data into the database, verifying side effects, reading, writing, deleting from the test database to make sure that when it gives you insights, they're real proof. They're not just inferred from static code reads or from black box testing. So we're gonna keep this one, and then we have 2 more steps to go. So the next one, I believe, is what we call landmines. So basically, these are just any peculiar things that are about the database that could trip Kerno. All right, so you see already here we have some rate limits. So 10 failed logins per user in 15 minutes locks the account, right? Like, so this is something that while Kerno is verifying, so if it's doing like a security verification with, you know, with trying to brute force an auth endpoint or something like that, it needs to know that if you reach 10, this will be locked. And so this is kind of important information for Kerno to validate the behavior application. So yes, we're gonna accept that. And then the final one, the final endpoint, is really around multi-tenancy. So if you have a multi-tenant app and there's any specific patterns and users to use while seeding the database for testing organizational boundaries and multi-tenancy, we want to know about those ahead of time instead of guessing them at runtime. So okay, and there you go. So it just tells us how to manage and how to work with the second identity, and how to seed it and things like that. So all of this is already probably exists in your repo. So we're just confirming that it's correct and setting the baseline before going into the validation phase. So let's keep it. And so now Claude is going to write this as a final custom rule to Kerno, and we should be good to go for this repo. Perfect. So the calibration is done. So we verified everything. As you can see here, these are custom rules that live under the .kerno folder that you can always review and change and adjust as needed. And so now basically we have everything set up for this repo, and this repo is ready for validation. So the next step from here would be to start creating baseline tests for your endpoints, for Kerno to understand how your application currently behaves, so that in the future, when you make code changes, Kerno can verify the behavior of those code changes against this baseline behavior and show you the diffs. That's it. And in the next video, we're going to show you how to create baselines.